topic I'm going to cover today is creating content that converts. So introducing you to a strategic content framework specific to B2B marketers and a manufacturing example in there. So first, I want to explore a little bit more about the challenges and kind of the state of the state. So what we know is that an effective content strategy can have a profound impact on your business. So B2B marketers who harness content effectively see an 84% increase in brand awareness, 76% improvement in lead generation, a 58% higher sales revenue. And when we think about where marketers are today in terms of the effectiveness of their content strategy, 71% report that their strategy is ineffective to only moderately effective. So really, only 29% feel that they're getting it right and truly being successful. And when we dig into the factors of what's actually holding them back, why their content strategies aren't as effective as they could be, two areas rise to the top. So 42% say it's a lack of clear goals in their content strategy, and 39% say that their content strategy is not tied to the customer journey. So when we take a closer look at those issues, first being the lack of clear goals, from working with various clients and from talking across different industries, I think that includes two levels. One is setting clear intent for content and how success will be measured on an individual content level. And then I think there's also the intent for how content performance will actually be attributed back to your overarching marketing and business goals. So there's kind of two frameworks there, and there's a variety of factors driving that gap, including there could be organizational silos where there's different business units across geographies and multiple different goals floating around there. There could be multiple functionally focused marketing teams that really make it difficult to define the shared business goal and how marketing is actually going to contribute to that. And then I think more and more we're feeling that organizational push for getting more leads to sales and driving more revenue, which spins us to focus on that lower funnel effort or those short-term strategies that are missing the mark in the end. The second highest is not tied to the customer journey. So again, I think there's kind of two components here. The first is the definition and insights of the ideal customer profile target, and this would be like an organizational target. I know we always want to be all things to everyone, but it is pretty critical to define who you're actually going after on an organizational level so that your content can reflect that. And I think there's also on that buyer level, having actionable insights about the buyers and their journey and how to actually apply that to your content. And as we all know, the B2B buyer journey has evolved, and they want to have control over their journey. They're content hungry. That plus the length of the sales cycle, a nonlinear purchase path, complex buying needs across the group, it means there's an exponential need for marketers to play a role in facilitating a productive buying journey. So, recap, only 29% of marketers feel like they're getting content strategies right and being successful. So if we can follow in the footsteps of those 29% with an effective content strategy, your buyers will look to you as the gold standard in the category for a better buying experience, which means more brand equity, leads are flowing, deals are closing. So my goal for you today is to be able to walk away building that content marketing strategy that drives growth for your business. All right, so let's start here. Because at MX, when we think about developing marketing strategies that move the needle, it's at the intersection point of four main elements. So let me talk you through these. The first is market dynamics. So what's going on in the market now for your buyers that makes your offering so important? Next is brand POV. How is your offering different from your competitors? What's your unique POV on the problem that your offering solves for? The next is audience needs. What initiated your buyers to start searching? What challenges are they looking to overcome? What does a successful purchase actually do for them? And finally, business goals. What is your organization's specific business goal, and how can marketing support it? When we put all those four together, that's really where the magic starts to happen. And that's what we're going to focus on, is mostly business goals and audience needs, but also how market dynamics and brand POV can also play a role along the way. So let's start by introducing one framework to help you define your target audience and what types of insights you'll be looking for along the way. So it really comes together to paint a more contextual and actionable big picture when you start crafting your content strategy. So here's the framework. It's really building that top line view that focuses on what you're selling and to whom. And note that we like to get specific here. So you might need to build several of these depending if you're going after different segments or you're selling multiple products or different portfolios. And the other word of advice that I think is very important is that you can't necessarily determine answers in a vacuum here. This is really a team effort. So you have to work with marketing leadership, the rest of your marketing teams, your sales teams, your product teams, even your account teams and subject matter experts, potentially even a little interview of a customer and a prospect along the way, which is going to uncover those details and that alignment that's really going to make all the difference in your success. So let's run through it together. First is specifying and offering a focus. So we want to start with what are you selling specifically? And we want to get down into granular details. So this is a portfolio level, or it could be a single product, depending on how you go to market. But think about the value that your offering brings to the market. How is it differentiated from the competition? What trends or influences make it highly relevant in today's market? And this will really help you contextualize the role your offering plays and the unique market opportunities to take advantage of there. Next is defining the organizational ICP, which is ideal customer profile target. So what does your ideal customer look like on an organizational level? So defining firmographics are key here, like what is the industry you're going after, the size of the business in terms of revenue or maybe employee number, the geographic territory, because that's all targeting information that's critical. But also understand their organizational characteristics, like what are some business challenges that are going on right now? What are success factors look like for them as a business? What are their investment priorities right now? And I think one of the bigger decisions here is how is your offering best suited for this ICP? And what's going to make you win? That's very critical when you're thinking through your content strategy. And then identify the actual buyers themselves, the persona targets. Who are your buyers? What's their role? What are their challenges, their perceptions, success metrics, and decision criteria when it comes to making a purchase like what you offer? Steps do they typically take in the buying process, and what's their actual role in that process? All right, now we're going to move on to goal setting. Now that we've understood and defined who our target is, let's talk about marketing goals. So as we all know, the word goals is thrown around so often. As marketers, it becomes fuzzy to actually define what that means and how to use them to be more effective without just becoming overwhelmed in a million data points. So at MX, we like to think of this in 3 categories to structure goals that actually work together to paint a more complete picture of how your marketing and your content efforts are contributing. So I'm going to start up at the top with revenue centric. These are the goals from a company level that marketing is tasked to contribute to. So it could be improving deal conversion rate or deal size, the total closed or won revenue. So these are all the North Star to quantify marketing's top line goals to the business that they're contributing to. Supporting this is brand centric. So this is defining more of the relationship of brand's contribution to the revenue growth. So impacting what that revenue centric goal is, how is brand playing a role? Is it through customer satisfaction? Is it market share, brand awareness, maybe even product margin or distributor preferences? So these things can all play a role in supporting your revenue centric goals. And then finally, the lane I think we're all the most familiar and probably comfortable with is the activity centric. So these are marketing specific metrics aligned around a program or a content centric goal, like number of leads generated, impressions, clicks, downloads. So now I want to provide a little bit additional context for each of these levels to help you define your own goals at each level. So the first is revenue centric goals. So plain and simple, how is marketing success defined in your organization? And a lot of times I think, we just automatically go to leads or we go to some sort of pipeline metric. But I think this is definitely critical to have defined in terms of a focus point. Specifically, how much revenue, leads, deals is marketing expected to contribute to meet the goals established? And then how is marketing planning to generate that revenue? What products are we selling? How many do we need to sell? What's the average deal size? How much opportunity do we have for cross-sell or upsell to current customers? So narrowing in on these goals is going to give you a clear roadmap to place your focus. And your brand-centric goals. you need to consider, in what ways do you need to influence your audience's perception? So what's the current state of the market that your brand can influence through their POV? How much of a lift does brand need to contribute to help meeting your goals? And what actions specifically will lead to meeting those brand-centric goals? Finally, from an activity level, in order to meet your revenue and brand-centric goals, how do your program and content goals align? Do you have a problem with finding qualified leads or a problem with lead conversion? This can help you define what programs you need to drive those activities. And then what content will be supporting those programs. We want to define specific performance KPIs to track against. And these paint a picture within the lens of the program of how each are contributing to success. All right, so when you put it all together, these goals combined provide that focus that you need. And to be successful here, you really need to have a clear definition of each phase of your marketing and sales pipeline that's aligned across the organization. So this could look very different depending on how your organization tracks this and how you do business. But understanding your current benchmarks and funnel conversion rates, even like conversion from MQL to SQL or SQLs to opportunities to closed won, are very important, because then you can kind of work backwards and you can start to map out what those quantified goals are for you. And as you put that back into alignment with the buyer's journey, you can also start to see the correlation between each stage and your marketing goals, and why developing a more full funnel content strategy is pretty important to enabling your success along the way. Cool. Okay, so that's a lot of theory, but let's actually see the framework in action here. I'll walk you through an example. Okay, so today the example is of a testing and simulation equipment manufacturer. And just to give you kind of a state of their business, they have many different business units of focus. They work in aerospace, automotive, civil engineering, biomedical, materials, energy, which almost in and of themselves operate as separate business units. They have different markets, different competitive sets, different buyers, varying differentiators. But today, in the spirit of our framework, we're going to focus in on their automotive testing category of their business, specific to passenger vehicles and selling to OEMs. And first, I want to kind of give you an idea of the state of the market, which I'm sure we are all aware of, but just to recap, the automotive market is dramatically evolving to moving away from that internal combustion engine to a focus on electric and autonomous vehicles. Now, OEMs have new testing needs because of this. There's first of their kind applications, and there's lots of innovative things going on. And when we think about our example company's competitive landscape, it's pretty broad. Many are focused on either a specific type of category, like durability testing, or maybe even just wheels in particular, or wind resistance. Some are more regional, like they're only in certain countries in particular. But our company provides full service capabilities from component to entire lab across the entire testing spectrum at a global reach. And our brand is already well known within the market. They have many existing relationships with OEMs, but the OEMs that we work with are the more traditional applications, so they might not realize that we span into those innovative applications. All right, let's use our framework and try it out. So first, for defining our offering, as I mentioned earlier, the state of the automotive market is evolving. That means OEMs are focused on developing new concepts like autonomous and electric vehicles. So as a part of that product development process is extensive testing from each component to full vehicle, and making sure those performance standards and quality is upheld in a range of conditions. So the new product focus means that they need to make sure that their vehicle testing labs will support this. Many competitive providers only provide those singular components, or like I mentioned, are regional. But the advantage our brand has in this offering in particular is that we have global expertise, a direct sales channel, a team of engineers with similar backgrounds as the OEM engineers, and an expansive customized equipment offering. And they understand that based on vehicle requirements, space requirements, testing requirements, what solutions actually need to be in place, and can act as partners as developing that. So our insight here in terms of our offering and how we're differentiated is we're more than just a testing equipment provider. We're your partners in innovation. Now let's move on to our ICP organization. So our focus here is global OEMs over 50 billion in revenue. From a business perspective, they're dealing with highly conceptual and innovative product development while navigating supply chain disruptions and regulations that might vary by region. And because much of this technology is evolving over time, it's important to ensure that there's flexibility and adaptability in their testing equipment to meet the needs of today and tomorrow. And our brand is well suited and has a clear differentiator in this area due to the global scope, engineering expertise, and we work with many of the cutting OEMs today. So when we think on a buyer level, one of the main buyers for this is an engineer. So they're responsible for managing the entire testing process and accountable for the results from an executional standpoint. They develop the testing technical requirements for the solution and do a light evaluation of vendors' capabilities on their own before they reach out for hands-on or maybe even an in-person demo process. They expect any vendor discussions to dive right into the technical complexities of the work to talk shop, not just selling them a solution. And they want to see behind the curtain to understand the accuracy level of the testing equipment, which is the top decision criteria, as we understand, next to capability evaluation. Now, what else do we know about engineers? They skew a little younger, they're still learning their trade, and they're pretty hungry for those learning opportunities. So it's important for them to constantly educate themselves through the latest research, events, vendor relationships, and they're more likely to want in-person learning opportunities when possible to get that hands-on experience. All right, now let's move on to our goal setting. So from a revenue perspective, we're looking to close $200 million in the passenger vehicle testing systems offering. And we estimate that about 75% of this is going to come from our existing OEM relationships and 25% from new OEM relationships. And from a brand perspective, the biggest hurdle to overcome is that perception issue. So most of our OEM engagements are rooted in that internal combustion engine focus, but we also want them to be aware of our brand's experience in the EV and autonomous space on a global level. Because we have that solid market share in those relationships, brand awareness is really not an issue, but it's really the perception that we need to shift. Okay, and then from an activity level, given all we know, our insights about our audience, we want to focus on education and event opportunities in the EV and autonomous space, targeting those engineers with a focus on generating cross-sell opportunities in those existing OEM relationships. How the content will support that and what we're going to be tracking is high event and educational content traffic, engagement metrics, and ultimately that customer inquiry generation. So when we put all that together and do the magical math to work backwards, you can see what this looks like in terms of our quantified goals for the business. So the majority of this is actually through that customer upsell and cross-sell. That's the biggest rock for us. Secondarily is getting those net new prospect opportunities in. So this really helps you just understand how much weight do our marketing programs need to carry for us, and where should our focus be if we're a small but mighty team that needs to prioritize in the end. So with that in mind, let me show you how we actually put that together to create a content strategy, the best part. So we have this lovely little chart where it maps out the entire full lifecycle need-based plan. Up top is defined the actual audience target, the product we're selling, the actual persona itself. And then, as you can see, each of the columns represented are phases in the buying journey. Now, these are all kind of example for ours today. Yours might look different. This all really does depend on the buyer and the steps that they take in their journey. But it spans from brand awareness all the way to advocacy of current customers. Now I'm going to talk you through each of the rows on the bottom so you can understand how this would get populated. And then I'll take you through an actual example. All right, let me click through here. Okay, so the buyer job to be done is a job that a buyer is working through whenever they aim to change their existing situation into a preferred one, but they can't because there's some kind of constraint that stops them. Now, this would vary across each of the buying journey stages. So from awareness level, maybe they're just looking to learn new trends in the industry, but from an initiation level, there could be other critical KPIs in actually standing up or onboarding that are more important to them. That's their job to be done. So this would evolve as they go through the buyer journey. Next is, what is this buyer challenge or perception that's holding them back? And this could be something real, like an actual, we don't have budget for this, or we have issues with X, component, or it could be something imagined. It could be a feeling. It could be a fear. So that's something that's very critical as we're uncovering those buyer insights to think about. Next is the questions that they're asking with the goal of changing their situation and overcoming those constraints. So in order to complete the job to be done, and in light of the challenges, how are they exploring the situation in order to solve their own challenges? And this really helps kind of break it down into their own voice, so you can kind of put yourself in their shoes when you're going to the next stage. So now enter the brand as the grand hero. What does our brand need to do or say to change their perception or to solve their challenge so they can meet those objectives? And ideally, this is something only your brand can solve for. So understanding your differentiators and, again, the POV, unique market situations that you can build in, all of that's very important. Now we get to the fun part. How do we actually bring that to life through the content? Through formats and topics? What do we need to create in order to carry out the brand communication objective? And I always like to think about it as, how do we answer those buyer questions asked? Finally, KPIs. So how are we going to measure that we successfully changed our buyer's behavior or perception? And this, again, will evolve depending on what your goals are in each of these phases. Now, yes, this does look like a lot of work, but I always recommend prioritization. So I'm going to show the example for our example today. We would be focused most on the expansion phase, because this is mainly defined as increasing our cross-sell or upsell opportunities. And let me zoom in a little bit here so I can read. So the buyer job to be done would be, we are expanding our portfolio into the EV and autonomous, and we need to make sure we're testing to the highest standards and accuracy level in every market we serve. This is the voice of the engineer. But their challenge is, we're unsure of the right way to build and adapt our vehicle testing labs to support product innovations evolving over the future. So there are questions asked here about, to overcome those challenges to complete their job to be done. Are there ways to adapt our existing testing systems for new applications? What net new testing equipment will we need to be flexible enough to evolve over time? And then our brand's communication objective is, with the breadth of engineering expertise spanning globally from ICE to EV and autonomous, we partner with OEMs to create innovative testing solutions with industry-leading accuracy. And then some content needed to solve that challenge is industry event presence, especially with engineers that are going to be present, that showcases our innovative work in EV and autonomous, educational training series for current clients to help them map the requirements over time, EV and autonomous focused engineering video series highlighting various topics, but really getting into work that's happening on the lab floor. And then our KPIs are ultimately laddering up to those net current customer inquiries and opportunity dollars, but we would also be tracking engagement and attendance for those event and training series. All right, we're reaching the end here. So my only other final piece of advice for you, and this is a template that will be sent back after the presentation, is how to use AI to help you. So once you have that strategic lifting done, which is like those first 4 columns, when you finally get down to the content ideation, you can let AI help you a lot. You can attach your strategic content plan and any other accompanying documents if you have buyer personas, if you have brand work that's done, and you can have them help you generate ideas for content, addressing challenges at each stage of their journey. And I like to throw in the include innovative content formats, which is always fun. Now you got to gut check it, because sometimes they send back crazy things, but sometimes there is a little gem in there. So it's very helpful. You can also use this to build out, after you have an idea, content outlines, even like interview guides, if you're kind of building some of this content out using internal SMEs, and promotional plans. So definitely tap into AI along the way. All right, and that brings me to the end of the presentation, but I just want to see if there's any questions before we wrap up.